Monetary unit sampling is an efficient and effective procedure used to test for overstatement. This procedure is also known by the names dollar unit sampling and probability proportional to size. In monetary unit sampling, larger amounts are more likely to be selected. The theory behind the monetary unit sampling is based upon attribute sampling, and although the statistics involved are somewhat complex, the actual procedure to perform the sampling is not. In this session, we'll demonstrate how to select a monetary unit sample and then show how to extrapolate the results based on the audit findings for the sample which has been selected. The approach used with WebCat is outlined as described in the article Monetary Unit Sampling Using Microsoft Excel. This article was published in the May 2005 edition of the CPA Journal, which is published for the New York State Society of CPAs. The authors of the article are two professors of accounting. Dr. Wempler is an accounting professor at Louisiana State University, and Dr. Meacham is the head of the accounting department at the University of Louisiana. Although he's not mentioned in the article, a key contributor to statistical theories underlying attribute sampling is Dr. John Bonaccorsi, who's a statistics professor at the University of Massachusetts. There are three steps involved in performing a monetary unit sampling. The first step is to determine a sample size and then select the sample using the methodology for monetary unit sampling. Once the sample has been selected, then all of the items are tested to determine the audited amount. After all the audited amounts have been determined, the results can then be assessed. This results in the extrapolation, which can determine whether the maximum tolerable amount of error has been exceeded. The assessment of the results is done by separating the audit exceptions into overstatements and understatements. For any sample examined, there can be three results. Either the audited value is larger than, equal to, or less than the examined or book value. Using the overstated amounts, the upper limit can then be calculated and compared with the maximum tolerable misstatement amount. If the amount is less than the maximum tolerable amount, then the examined values are accepted. If the amount exceeds the maximum tolerable amount, then the examined amount is considered to be overstated. To demonstrate the procedure, we'll select a sample of 55 records. We'll then prepare a schedule of the results of the audit examination, and then we'll assess the results. The data that we're going to audit is an Excel worksheet called FA for fixed assets. And you can see the various information. We're going to primarily focus on cost, but any sort of Excel sheet can be selected. So what we want to do is select a sample of 55 records from this Excel sheet in accordance with the sampling methodology for monetary unit sampling. And we're going to walk through that process using WebCat. So inside WebCat, what we want to do is select that Excel file that's called fixed assets. And we can browse to that folder, and then we'll just double click the Excel file, Excel workbook, and select it. So now an Excel workbook can have a number of sheets. This particular one only has 2 sheets, and we're going to select the sheet called FA. So we click that, and now what we want to do is select a sample of 55 that we can use for monetary unit sampling. So we do that by going into Functions, Audit Functions, and then Monetary Unit Sample Selection. So we highlight that menu item and click on it, and all we have to do is provide the number of samples that we need, which in this case is 55, and we can provide a random seed number to be used for the selection. So we click on the Process button, and it will go out and select 55, as you can see here, samples, and these are selected appropriately for monetary unit sampling. At the bottom of the report, we get a recap. This tells us what our population totals are, what our sample size is. It shows you the interval that was used, the random start, the seed value that was used, and the sample count and the sample dollars. So what we will do is we'll take these 55 records, and then we'll go ahead and actually audit the values for each one of these. Like the first one here has a cost of $6,885. So we'll go ahead and we'll pull this particular record and do the audits on it and determine what the audited amount should be, which obviously can either be the same value that's recorded, or it can be less than or greater than, and we're testing for overstatement. So in this next session, what we'll do is we'll show the results of the audit findings. Once the sample has been selected, we'll go ahead and prepare a worksheet that contains the summary information about the audit results. And you can see here on this sheet we have 55 samples listed. The second column is examined. This is the book value that we looked at. The title doesn't really matter. Then the third column is the audited value. This is the value that we determined that it should be after looking at all the supporting documentation. And of course, you may have quite a number of other columns as well. Sometimes you want to pull in all of the information from the sample to put on the workbook. But in actuality, all we're going to need is these two columns of the book value and the audited value, and they can be called anything that you like. So in this next session, we're going to open up this workbook in WebCat and do an assessment on it. In order to assess the results, we'll need to take a look at the workbook, which has the summary information from the results of the audit, which in this case was called MUS data. So we'll go ahead and we'll select that file. We'll browse for it. It's called app data, and we'll select it. And then it has a number of sheets on there, so we'll go down to the sheet that contains our summary information, which is called MUS data, and we select that worksheet. And now to do the assessment, we would go into Audit Functions, Monetary Unit Sampling Assessment. So we click on that sheet, and now it's going to ask us for the name of the column that contains the examined amount. This would be the book value. So we can call this, whatever it's called on the Excel workbook, we just, for simplicity's sake, happen to call it examined. This could be called, obviously, anything you like. And then the name of the column that contains the audited amount. This is what you determine the amount that should have been once you did examined all the supporting documentation, etc. So now we need to enter the size of the sample that was selected, which in this case is 55, and then you'll enter the population amount, expected error amount, the tolerable misstatement amount, which in this case is 9%, acceptable risk of incorrect acceptance, and confidence level, and so on and so forth. And then we'll just, once we have all this information entered, we just click the process button. Now, the report is going to show you, is really broken up into three areas. The top part of it just shows you what information went into it. In other words, the population size, the sample size, misstatement amount, risk of acceptance, etc. And then you'll notice here that the remainder is separated between the overstatements and the understatements, and we're going to focus on the overstatements. There were actually 4 overstatements altogether, 2 understatements. So what this does is in accordance with that article, it separates these out into layers and weights. I'm not going to go into all the statistics underlying it, but basically what it's doing is building up a maximum amount that the errors can be. So for example, the first error item would result, it was calculated to have an impact of 16,200. The second one would have an impact of 2,456, so on and so forth. So now you get an upper limit for the overstatement, which is the sum of all of these, comes out to 20,342. And then we also have a similar type of information for the understatement. But we're primarily concerned with the overstatement here, and you can see a recap at the bottom. It says the sample results accept that the amount is not overstated because our upper limit, the 20,342, is less than the tolerable misstatement of 27,000 up here at the top. So again, just to recap all of this, the underlying computations are somewhat complex. And there's a lot of detail in that article that we talked about on the New York CPA Journal. But this, the actual process to do the computations, I believe you can see, is fairly quick and is relatively easy.